Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is SYAQYLLA binti Muhammad ZAKY. My metric number 1212117. We are from Group 6. We'll present about the topic of Qadariyyah movements. So let's begin first with introductions. Firstly, theological diversity has been an intrinsic aspect of Islamic intellectual history, reflecting the depth and complexity of its foundational teachings. Numerous theological movements have arisen over the ages, all of which have struggled with the central issues of predestinations, human free will, and divine justice. The Qadariyyah is notable among these movements as one of the first schools of thought stressing human agency and opposing deterministic viewpoints. These theological discussions affected socio-political process in the Muslim world in addition to shaping Islam's intellectual environment. This study aims to explore the teachings of the Qadariyyah movement, tracing its emergence, core principles, and its interaction with the broader framework of Islamic theology, by examining its foundational concepts, which are free will, moral responsibility, and divine justice. Lastly, this study also seeks to highlight the similarities and differences between Qadariyyah and Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, the predominant theological orientation in Islam, to assess the movement's contributions and challenge to orthodox interpretations.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name NURNABILAH HUDA binti MUDA. My metric number 1212061. Let's go to the problem statement. Qadariyyah, a theological school in the history of Islam, most known for since it was true the issue of free will, that they challenged the prevailing interpretation of divine predestination during a period when apostasy concerns were a common problem. In spite of the existing of research, the complexity of the Qadariyyah theology called for more investigation, and then only we can claim the full understanding, in particular in reference to their view on free will, predestination, and also the divine justice. Next, this research present aimed at the analysis of the history, the usul mazhab of the theological and the ideological differences, and the similarity of the Qadariyyah and Ahli Sunnah wal Jama'ah, which is a Sunni school, to have a better view of the deviations of Qadariyyah in Islamic perspective. The research question and objective of our research: first one is to explain the emergence of Qadariyyah movement, second one to analyze the usul mazhab of Qadariyyah movement, and last one to compare the similarities and the differences between the Qadariyyah movement and the mazhab Ahli Sunnah wal Jama'ah Sunni. The research methodology that we use in our research is qualitative, which is by reading books in libraries, reading articles and journals on the website.
My name is SYARIFAH NURNABILAH binti SHAIKH. My metric number 1212122. The emerge of the Qadariyyah movement. The Qadariyyah movement originated during the Umayyad period, 661 to 750 century, a time of intense theology and political debates. The early Umayyad caliphs was marked by dispute over who should be lead the Muslim community, alongside question about moral, political, and theological rules of the caliphs. The central issue at the time was the debate between free will, championed by the Qadariyyah, and divine predestination, which was supported by the Jabariyah. The Qadariyyah strongly advocate for human free will, emphasizing that individuals are responsible for their action, and oppose the idea of predestination, with the Umayyad used to justify their rules. Over time, the dogmatic struggle between the Qadariyyah and the Jabariyah evolved into the fully political matter. Politically, the Qadariyyah critiqued the Umayyad caliphs for claiming divine right to rules, while often acting unjustly. In both Islamic intellectual and political spheres, the Qadariyyah opposition to predestination and the divine right of king marked a historical turning point. The Qadariyyah emphasize the concept of human free will, asserting that individuals are the creator of their own action, independent of any divine intervention. They rejected the idea of predestination, arguing that attributing evil action to God contradicts divine justice, as true accountability requires human freedom of choice. The movement emerged as a response to the oppressive policy of the Umayyad, who justified their rule through a predestination ideology that claimed God will determine everything, including the action of rules. In contrast, the Qadariyyah promote the belief that humans shape their own destiny and are fully responsible for their action, challenging both theological and political notion of divine control. This stance not only addressed theological concern, but also served as a critique of the Umayyad attempt to legitimize their rules through the idea of predestination.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is MAISARAH binti Muhammad Nur Hakim and nama matric 1212104. The usul mazhab of Qadariyyah movement is criticism of tyrannical rule. The context and critique. The Qadariyyah movement emerged as a response to the oppressive governance of the Umayyad dynasty. They critique the use of the concept of divine destiny Qadar by the Umayyad to legitimize their power and oppress the people. Core belief: Qadariyyah emphasize human will free in making choice and opposing unjust authority. They encourage political discourse that supported rebellion against tyranny, in contrast to the fatalistic view held by some group within Islam. The impact of Islamic thought. The teaching of Qadariyyah highlighted the moral responsibility of leaders and challenged the legitimacy of oppressive regimes. This contributes to the growing awareness among Muslims regarding legitimate leadership, inspiring movement aimed at overthrowing oppressive rule throughout Islamic history. Ethical foundations. This theological viewpoint was based on a broader ethical principle of justice and accountability in governance. It fostered the idea that resistance to oppression is a moral obligation grounded in the belief in human dignity and individual autonomy.
Next, usul mazhab of Qadariyyah movement is divine justice adl. The Qadariyyah movement's emphasis on divine justice shows its attempt to reconcile Allah's justice with the notions of human freedom and moral accountability. According to this school of thinking, true justice requires that humans be given the freedom to choose their actions. They reason that if Allah predetermined every action, including sinful behavior, and then punish mankind for it, divine justice would be arbitrary and unjust. Instead, the Qadariyyah argued that individuals' liability for sin or righteousness depends in an individual's free choice, retaining Allah's justice as impartial and equitable. This viewpoint was partly a reaction to Al-Jabariyah deterministic beliefs, which held that humans are completely dependent on Allah's wills and have no personal responsibility for their acts. However, the critics said that this viewpoint undermined Allah's omnipotence by implying that human activities may exist irrespective of divine decree, raising theological concerns about the balance between Allah's will and human liberty. Despite such disagreement, the Qadariyyah perspective on divine justice became a cornerstone of their theological approach.
Let's go to the second last point, divinity, which is Al-Tawhid. The Qadariyyah oppose the belief that Allah as Zat is something but not like anything else. They do not differentiate between Allah's essence and His various attributes. They say that is considering to be the same. This theological perspective motivates them to argue that the attributes of Allah are distinct, should not be given any emphasis. They also argue that Allah does not have such attributes as knowledge, power, life, hearing, or signs, nor are these attributes immortal. They confirm that Allah is without a physical form, which is ghayru tajsim and devoid of supernatural resemblance to the attributes of His creatures. Any such characteristic will apply that there are multiple essence of Allah which they regard as absolutely unacceptable. Qadariyyah refute the concept of seeing Allah with physical eyes in both the world and the hereafter was also made by them.
Okay, next, the usul mazhab of Qadariyyah movement is individual responsibility. Qadariyyah have a unique view about individual responsibility which is at the core of its teaching. It emphasizes that humans have free will ikhtiyar and are therefore fully responsible for every action that they have take. The school of Qadariyyah have a view that humans were endowed with reason and free will to make decisions in their life. The school of Qadariyyah also rejects the view that all human actions have been determined by God from the beginning, which is predestination. So that they emphasize human freedom because every individual has a responsibility for what that they have choose. Moreover, for the school of Qadariyyah, the relationship between mind and responsibility are really important because it is used as a tool for them for understanding the truth and making a decision.
Next, we will explain about the similarities between Qadariyyah movement and Mazhab Ahli Sunnah. First, belief in one God, Tawheed. Both the Qadariyyah and Mazhab Ahli Sunnah share a fundamental belief in Tawheed, the oneness of God, affirming Allah as the sole creator and sustainer, which form the core of the Shahadah and the foundation of the Islamic faith. As Islamic first philosophical school, the Qadariyyah strongly upheld Tawheed. It also aligning closely with the Quranic emphasis on God, unity, and uniqueness, as reflected in Surah Al-Ikhlas. This shared understanding of Tawheed highlight a common theological framework between the Qadariyyah and Mazhab Ahli Sunnah.
The similarity between Qadariyyah movement with Ahl Sunnah is recognition of prophethood. Fundamental similarity, both the Qadariyyah movement and Ahl Sunnah share a core belief in the prophethood of Muhammad as the final messenger of God, the Quran as revelation. Both groups regard the Quran as the ultimate source of divine revelation, believing it to be the literal word of God. Guide for life. The teaching of Prophet Muhammad and the principle in the Quran are followed by both as a guide for moral conduct and spiritual growth. The important about that, despite theological differences, this mutual recognition of prophethood and scripture highlight a significant area of agreement between Qadariyyah and Ahl Sunnah.
Next, the similarities between Qadariyyah movement with Mazhab Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah in reward and punishment. Both Qadariyyah and Mazhab Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah agree on the fundamental concept of reward and punishment on the Day of Judgment, which is a central pillar of Islamic theology. Both schools of thought agree that humans will be held accountable for their deeds and that Allah will reward or punish them in the hereafter, depending on that accountability. This idea is based on the Quranic principle that Allah's justice ensures that every individual is judged fairly based on their actions, as stated in passage like, "Whoever does an atom's weight of good shall see it, and whoever does an atom's weight of evil shall see it." In Quran 99:7-8. The Qadariyyah place a strong emphasis on moral responsibility. claiming that humans have complete free will to make decisions, making them totally accountable for their actions and deserving of appropriate rewards or punishments. Similarly, Ahlul Al-Sunnah wal Jama'ah defend accountability while integrating it with the belief in Allah's overarching will, claiming that while humans have limited free will, their actions are guided by divine decisions, qada wa qadr. Despite their divergent views on the nature of free choice and predestinations, they both believe that ultimate justice will be given on the Day of Judgment, when Allah's omniscience ensures that all deeds are judged equally. These shared convictions highlights the common ground between the two theological schools, demonstrating a mutual commitment to the principle of divine justice as represented in the Quran and Hadith.
To the last point of similarities between Ahlussunnah wal Jama'ah and Qadariyyah movement, which is rejections of idol worship. Qadariyyah and Mazhab Ahlussunnah wal Jama'ah both reject idol worship. They are on the principle of Tawheed. The oneness of Allah refutes any kind of association with adultery. Idol worship is the act of generating created objects, deities, or intermediaries alongside or instead of Allah, holds the same guilt by monotheism in Islamic religion. Both of them point out that they know to any action which can diminish the absoluteness of Allah's oneness and uniqueness. Both taught us strictly to the point that no entity besides Allah should be worshipped, and any deviation from this is a shirk, the most dishonorable offense in Islam.
Okay, next, the similarities between Qadariyyah movement and Mazhab Ahli Sunnah is moral responsibility. The concept of moral responsibility is a shared belief between the Qadariyyah and Ahli Sunnah despite their theological differences regarding free will and predestination. Both Qadariyyah and Ahli Sunnah affirm that every individual is morally responsible for their actions. Since humans choose their actions freely, they bear the consequence, whether rewards or punishments. While Allah creates the potential for actions, humans acquire responsibility for their choice through intention and effort. Humans are obligated to adhere to the principles of Sharia, Islamic law, and fulfill duties such as prayer, fasting, charity, and treating others with kindness and justice. Both emphasize the role of divine revelation, which is Quran and Sunnah, as the ultimate guide for moral conduct.
Next, we will go to the differences between the Qadariyyah movement and Ahli Sunnah. The primary differences is the view on free will and predestination. The Qadariyyah strongly affirm human freedom, rejecting the concept of predestination and asserting that all action originate from individual choice and self-will, independence of God control. In their view, humans are fully accountable for their actions. In contrast, the Ahli Sunnah influenced by Ash'ari thought offer a more balanced perspective, where human free will exists alongside divine decree al-Qadar. According to this view, human action occur with God foreknowledge and will, maintaining a sense of justice and harmony between divine sovereignty and human responsibility. This distinction highlights the theological divide between the Qadariyyah emphasize on absolute human freedom and the Ahli Sunnah belief in the coexistence of free will with divine predestination.
The differences between Qadariyyah movement with Ahli Sunnah is understanding of divine attributes. Qadariyyah emphasize a more abstract understanding of God. God attributes such as knowledge and power are not separate from His essence. God's knowledge depends on human action. He only knows what choice humans will make after they have made them. Humans are fully responsible for their action. God does not predetermine their choice. Ahli Sunnah, God attributes knowledge, power are eternal and distinct from His essence. God's knowledge encompasses all possibilities, including human choice. There is a balance between God's sovereignty and human free will.
Next, the differences between Qadariyyah and Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah is nature, good and evil. The Qadariyyah and Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah vary profoundly in their ideas on the essences of good and evil, particularly regarding the origin of human deeds. The Qadariyyah believe that humans are the only creators of their actions, both good and evil, because they have complete free will. According to Qadariyyah, attributing humans' actions directly to Allah will imply that Allah is the cause of evil, which contradicts His justice. This viewpoint is consistent with their emphasis on moral responsibility and divine justice, arguing that accountability is only meaningful if humans have complete autonomy in their choice. In contrast, Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah believe that while humans have limited free will and are morally responsible for their decisions, Allah is the ultimate creator of all actions. This belief is based on the Quranic verse, "And Allah has created you and what you do," in Quran 37:19-6, which they interpret to mean that human actions take place within the framework of divine will and decree. Lastly, according to Sunni theology, Allah's omnipotence covers all creations, including human deeds, which humans acquire by their intentions and efforts. That's all from me. Thank you.
The differences between Ahli Sunnah wal Jama'ah and Qadariyyah movement about the Quran as the words of Allah, which is Quran, the Kalamullah. First, the point is nature of the Quran. Qadariyyah movement say that Quran is a created thing, which is makhluk, and therefore is temporal, not internal. But Ahli Sunnah wal Jama'ah counter that Quran is uncreated and internal, being an intrinsic attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Second, relation to Allah essence. Qadariyyah says that Quran is not part of Allah's essence. It is a linguistic expression of His will, emphasizing the distinction between Allah's eternal nature and created attributes. But Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah counter that Quran is inseparable from Allah's essence. It is His eternal speech, which is Kalamullah and a divine attribute. Ontological emphasis of Quran. Qadariyyah believe that Quran was created emphasize Allah's transcendence and the distinction between the Creator and His creations. But Ahli Sunnah wal Jama'ah counter and believe in the Quran's eternal nature underscore its divine origin, unaltered status and connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala internal existence. For the last point is a view of temporality versus eternity. Qadariyyah believe that the Quran as a temporal event underscore the concept that Allah's action and attributes can exist within time without being eternal. But Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah counter the point with say that the Quran's eternity reflects that Allah's words are timeless and predate creations, affirming His infinite nature.
And the last one is the differences between Qadariyyah movement and Mazhab Ahli As-Sunnah is the role of akal, reason. For the Qadariyyah place significant emphasis on human reason as a primary tool for discerning truth, morality and justice. Qadariyyah assert that reason has the capacity to determine right and wrong without full reliance on divine revelation, which is Quran and Sunnah. This is really differ from Ahli As-Sunnah view, where Quran and Sunnah as the divine revelation is the first reference that we will use before use the reason. And for Ahli As-Sunnah, they acknowledge the importance of reason but emphasize its limitation and subordinate it to divine revelation, which is Quran and Sunnah. Revelation is seen as the ultimate source of truth, where reason serves as a tool to interpret and apply that truth. Ahlul Sunnah also acknowledge the value of reason, but subordinate it to divine revelation, emphasizing the limits of human intellect when it comes to comprehending Allah's wills and attributes.
In conclusion, the Qadariyyah movement has had a significant impact on Islamic theological discourse, particularly regarding free will, moral responsibility, and divine justice. It challenges deterministic view by emphasizing human agency, offering a new perspective on accountability. Although Qadariyyah and Ahlus Sunnah share fundamental beliefs such as Tawheed, their interpretation differ on matters like free will and divine attributes. Qadariyyah emphasize human responsibility, while Ahlus Sunnah balance human will with Allah predestination. This movement continues to enrich Islamic thought on issue of freedom, faith, and justice.